I walked in on my roommate working at our local gay bar. When I moved to the city, I certainly had not seen myself throwing up and passing out at a bar, or cursing out my mother. But then again, considering the type of town I grew up in, there was no way I could have predicted what city living would have been like at all. My relatives couldn't believe it. Their little Elijah moving to live in the big city? Most of them had figured I would do what most people who came from our small town did. Get married, move out of their parents' place, and live somewhere in town or nearby at the very least. What I chose to do was rare. Moving out right after college with no wife or plans to start a family. To the city, no less. This came as a shock to a lot of people, including my parents. They had already labeled me a failure, comparing me to my younger brother who at 23 was already engaged. I did average in school and had nothing else going for me. In their eyes, my best bet was staying home and trying to make something of myself there. But now I was moving to the city? It was absurd to them. There were concerns of me bringing home a worldly city girl, but I knew that wasn't going to happen. I had no interest in city girls. I had no interest in girls at all. I figured out I was gay at like 11. It wasn't a grand revelation or anything like that. I just realized, oh, I like boys. Even at that age, I had the sense not to let anyone know. No one had sat me down and told me, "You'll be in a lot of trouble if you turn out gay, young man." But I had already sort of gotten that picture. And as I got older, no one had to tell me that. I could see it in the way my parents reacted with disgust at the mere mention of someone possibly being gay. I understood quickly that the same disgust would certainly be directed at me if I made my true nature clear to them. So terrified of disappointing them, I hid it. And hid it. And hid it. And suddenly, I was 25, done with college, and suddenly had the opportunity to move out of my parents' place, to leave my hometown behind entirely. I took it, of course. I realized that moving to the city would give me the opportunity to do a lot of things. Away from the ever-watchful eyes of my hometown, I would be able to actually explore my sexuality, a side of myself that I had hidden for so long. In the days leading up to my move, I thought about it a lot, but I always brushed the idea aside. Sure, being in the city would mean that, theoretically, I would be able to be as gay as I wanted, but what guy would even want to be with me? I didn't understand how gay dating culture worked. I was a sheltered boy from a remote hick town who had never even held hands with another man. I was wallowing in my own inexperience. So, I set aside my thoughts of finding love and focused my energy on proving to my parents that I wasn't a failure. I was going to live a successful and fulfilling adult life. I could do that without exploring my romantic feelings. I was at that point unaware of how weird the heart can be when it sees what it wants. I made the move. During my preparations, I had come in contact with someone looking for a roommate. The split rent was affordable, and from the pictures that were posted online, the apartment itself was nice looking. My would-be roommate's name was Cedric Gerald. Over text, he seemed like a serious but friendly guy. In real life, however, standing a couple inches taller than me, Cedric was pretty much everything I pictured when I thought of someone who had something going for them. He was fit, with neat dark hair and dark blue eyes and a painfully handsome face. A jawline that could cut diamond. Spoke in a low, pleasing tone. I didn't even want to imagine how I looked next to him. Probably like a frumpy nerd with huge glasses and a mess of curly brown hair. Cedric was a student and was working on his master's degree via an online course. He attended online classes frequently while we were at home, only leaving on some nights to go to work. I worked every day at an IT call support center, which was rather soul-sucking to be frank, but it paid well. Cedric and I had a lot in common. In fact, we probably would have hit it off right from the get-go, but I found myself getting attracted to him instantly. I would watch him move around the apartment sometimes, unable to contain my admiration for him. Sometimes he would smile while watching a video online or stretch in a way that would make the muscles of his toned arms flex, and I would wonder, how on earth was I living with someone so beautiful? And he wanted to be friends. I could tell that much. He was serious about his schoolwork, but he would still try to talk to me, try to spend time with me. I wanted to get close to him just as much, probably even more, but I was intimidated by him and worried he would find out I was attracted to him. I was afraid I would disgust him. So, even when we would occasionally laugh and chat with each other, I put up a wall between the both of us. He picked up on this quickly and gave me some space, but sometimes we would accidentally peek over that wall and look right at each other. Once, about 3 weeks after I had moved in with him, I walked past his room and spotted him playing a video game through his slightly open door. To my surprise, it was one I was familiar with, and one he had just started playing. "You should check behind that box," I said, unable to stop myself. "There's some really good loot in there." Cedric turned to look at me surprised. "Oh, hey," he mumbled, before turning back to the game. "What, that box?" "Yeah, trust me," I answered. Cedric turned back to the game and navigated his character to the box in question, an item most new players would ignore. He interacted with it and sat up in surprise when he received a powerful weapon that would make the next few sections of the game significantly easier. "Wow." When he turned back to me, he was grinning, and I had to pretend like that didn't raise butterflies in my stomach. "Have you played this before?" he asked. I smiled and shrugged. "I've got a couple hours on it." "A couple hundred," I added mentally. "Yeah?" He turned back to the screen. "Come help me out. I can't get past this damn stage. I've been running out in circles." I laughed and stepped into his room, not realizing that it was the first time I was doing that. I went over to his bed and sat beside him. He smelled like soap. His hair was slightly damp. He had just gotten out of the shower. I scolded myself for noticing something like that and began guiding him through the level. I only meant to do it for a few minutes, until he got his bearings, but I found myself sitting with him for that entire section of the game, watching his reactions to my favorite moments. And then, before we knew it, the sun started to set. He glanced out the window and cursed, picking up his phone to look at his watch. "I've got class soon. I completely forgot." He sighed and turned off the game. "Oh, my bad," I answered. It was then I noticed just how long I had been in there with him. It had been at least 3 hours. I had gone from sitting an awkward distance away to being right by his side, watching the game as he played. But now, there was nothing else to watch but him. "It's fine," he smiled as he got up. "That was fun. We should hang out like that more." Like an arrow straight to my heart, it was a wonder how I was able to keep a normal facial expression after that. I just nodded and left the room, embarrassed. I felt like a little boy with a crush. I wasn't going to make that known. Well, I tried to keep my distance, but a few weeks later, as much as I had wanted my life in the city to be a fresh and exciting start, I quickly found myself falling into a boring monotony of work, then home, then work. I steadily grew frustrated, and one Friday night, while I was alone at home, Cedric had gone to work, and scrolling through social media, I came across an advertisement for a gay bar that was very nearby, and I made the spontaneous decision to go there. I needed to do something different. Even if I didn't talk to anyone, it would be okay if I just went to check it out, just to do something different for once. I was so bored, I could feel my brain rotting in my skull. So, I got ready and called for an Uber. I'm not sure what I expected to happen when I got there, but what I should have expected is exactly what happened. I got overwhelmed by the amount of people there, by the loud music, and I found a corner to hide myself while I drank. I felt stupid. Everyone around me looked completely at ease and confident. I was sure I looked a mess, but I was too embarrassed to leave immediately, so I waited. An hour passed as I nursed on my 4th drink of the night my eyes roaming around the room. That was when I spotted a familiar face. Cedric was right across from me, standing and leaning against a table, talking to another man with a somewhat annoyed expression on his face. The form-fitting uniform and the tray of drinks in his hands told me one thing very quickly. He worked here. As the shock settled in, he suddenly made eye contact with me. He narrowed his eyes in disbelief before they widened as he realized that, yes, it was me. He blinked rapidly in surprise, causing the other man he was talking to turn around and look at me too. I sank down in my seat in mild embarrassment. The only thing that served as some relief for me was the fact that Cedric himself looked kind of embarrassed as well. He had never mentioned his job and I had never asked, but it looked like he was aware of his good looks and was using them to get some extra tips. To make an already odd situation even worse, I started to feel ill, very ill. From the few times I had gone drinking back home, I had come to the conclusion that I could hold my liquor well, but it seemed like I had drunk something too strong for me. Frantic, I stood up. I absolutely could not throw up in public like some kind of lightweight. Pressing my hand to my mouth, I looked around for the nearest exit and spotted the back door that was cracked open. I made a beeline towards it, pushing my way past the people around me. The door led me to a back alley where I proceeded to double over and puke my dinner out. I felt dizzy and sweaty. I heard movement from behind me, but I didn't bother looking back until I felt someone crouch down beside me and put an arm on my shoulder. I looked up to see Cedric beside me, watching me in concern. And that was the last thing I saw before I passed out. When I came to again, I was in a quiet, air-conditioned room. My head was resting on a cool table and my mouth tasted like vomit. I raised my head and looked around dazed. I was in what looked like a break room, and I was the only one there, or so I thought, until I heard someone speak from behind me. "You're up." I turned my head. Cedric was seated on the couch beside me, now wearing his own clothes. He stood and walked over to the table I was seated at, pulling out a chair and seating beside me. "Hey," I croaked, rubbing my eyes. "Hey," he responded, and then he smiled. "Just a word of advice for next time. We've got some pretty strong stuff over here." "Yeah, I got that," I laughed awkwardly, glancing away. "I didn't know you worked here." "And I didn't know you would be interested in coming here," he responded, resting his forearms on the table with a laugh. "You learn something new every day." Well, he was right about that. "I just wanted to try it out. It's not really the type of thing I usually do," I said. "Well, if you decide to try it out again, look for me next time," he offered. "This place can be a little much if you've never been here before, but it's pretty fun when you're used to it," he smiled. "At the very least, I could recommend a drink that won't make you throw up." "I would appreciate that." As I looked around, I noticed the sound of muffled pounding music from the other room. "By the way, what's the time?" He paused to check his phone. 2:00. I raised my brows in surprise. "It's that late? Shouldn't you be home by now?" I asked. "Yeah, my shift has been over for a while now," he stood up. "But I wanted to make sure you are okay first. We can head back now if you're ready. You should get some water first, though." The fact that he had waited for me to feel better made me rather happy. As we both headed home together, I knew that it would become a lot harder for me to keep my feelings for him under control, especially since I knew now that there was a chance he liked men, however small that chance actually was. After all, I was certain someone like him had much better options. But the ice was officially broken that day, and Cedric and I started to grow even closer. He seemed to be aware of my chronic awkwardness, though I'm sure that was clear to anyone with eyes, and wanted to help me out after I explained my situation to him. "So you're looking for a boyfriend?" he asked me. We both sat together in the living room. The TV was on, but neither of us were really listening. I shrugged. "I mean, I guess. I don't know what my chances of getting one are, though." He was quiet for a moment as he eyed me. I mean, you're definitely an attractive guy. I'd say your chances would be higher if you had a bit more confidence, though. I sighed and leaned back. That's easier said than done, you know. He laughed. Hey, don't worry about it. I'll help you out, okay? I appreciated his help, of course, but the situation was awkward. Well, it was mostly awkward for me because here was my 10 out of 10 crush offering to help me find a boyfriend. I still didn't even know if he liked men. I could have just asked, sure, but I didn't want to make my attraction to him too obvious. Part of me believed it was super obvious already. I started visiting him at work every night I could. And true to his word, he did help me, getting me to sit beside guys that I might hit it off with, even giving me advice on the type of stuff to wear before I left the house. But I would always find my gaze following him no matter who I was sitting beside, which is how I eventually did find out he likes men. A few days later, I sat by myself that night, content with just listening to the music. Well, that's what I told Cedric when I arrived. In truth, I just didn't want to have to pretend to pay attention to some stranger's conversation. I felt a bit pathetic pining over my roommate like that while not having the courage to let him know how I felt, but I truly believed I didn't have a chance. Besides, even if I did pursue him, and even if he did accept, what would I tell my parents? They would lose their minds. I would go from being a disappointment to an outright failure. I was content with just admiring him from afar, or so I thought. As I watched Cedric, a man walked up to him while he was returning from waiting a table, which stopped Cedric in his tracks. The man was about Cedric's height, with short blonde hair. It took a moment to recognize him, but he was the man Cedric had been talking to the night I vomited outside the building. I didn't even have the time to wonder what his relationship with Cedric was before he suddenly leaned in close, wrapping an arm around Cedric's waist and leaning in to whisper something in his ear. Cedric rolled his eyes and pushed the man away, seeming rather exasperated. The other man laughed, walking away and leaving Cedric alone for the rest of the night. The interaction, however, put a very bitter taste in my mouth, one I tried to wash away with alcohol. I stayed until Cedric's shift was over. Seeing how wasted I was, he drove me home and helped me up the stairs to our apartment. It's a wonder you didn't blow chunks again, he teased gently as we stepped into the living room. What were you doing drinking so much? I didn't answer, still too drunk and too busy sulking. He hummed curiously, holding onto my shoulders and turning me around to face him. He looked amused, which just irritated me further. Earth to Eli. Someone piss you off when I wasn't looking or what? He asked playfully. I knew it wasn't my place to get angry or jealous. I had done all I could to hide my feelings from Cedric. If he decided to have another relationship, that wasn't any of my business. I knew that. But the words tumbled out of my mouth anyway. Who was that guy? I asked, my words slurred. What guy? Cedric asked. Blonde. He hugged you, I explained. Oh, Cedric sighed, glancing away briefly. Patrick? He's an ex, but lately he's been showing up to flirt with me like that. We ended on decent terms, but I'm pretty sure he wants us to get back together. Why? Instead of answering his question, I asked another stupid one. Do you want to? Cedric paused, raising his brows in what was obvious surprise. My face grew warm. Never mind actually, suddenly much more sober. I shook myself out of his hold and stepped back. That's not really any of my business, sorry, I was just curious, I mumbled, turning away from him and starting to stumble back to my room. I mean, it's fine, I don't mind if you ask those kind of questions, I heard Cedric call after me. But I was so embarrassed by my own neediness, I didn't want to do anything but hide. Not answering him, I went into my room and flopped onto the bed. Frankly, I felt rather pathetic. I had been pining after him for nearly 3 months at that point. I had every chance to get closer to him. I lived with the guy. Now, I was going to lose him to someone else. But Could I even call it losing if I had never bothered to compete? I stayed in my room the entire night. 2 days later. Cedric and I didn't talk much for a while. I was too ashamed to face him properly. As understanding as ever, he gave me my space, which frustrated me. Late one night, I heard him come home from work. He slammed the door shut to announce his arrival, which just let me know that he was angry. He never did that. I poked my head out of my room in time to watch him storm down the hall to his door. He opened it, entered his room, and slammed that door shut too. His expression had looked frustrated. I had never seen him look that angry before. Something told me just to leave him alone, but I was worried. I stepped out of my room and walked over to his door, knocking gently. "Come on in," I heard him say. I stepped into the room a bit meekly. He was in the middle of changing, pulling his shirt down over his head. He turned to glance at me, his expression slightly apologetic. "Was I making a lot of noise?" he asked. "Sorry about that." It's fine," I said. "You all right?" He walked over to his bed and sat. He left enough space to sit beside him, where I had sat the last time I had been in his room, so I walked over and sat next to him. "I'm fine, just ran into a bit of trouble at work today," he explained. "With Patrick. The guy won't leave me alone. I got chewed out by my boss today because he thought I was flirting with him on the job. I just wish he would get the hint that I don't want anything to do with him anymore." "Oh," I responded. So he didn't want to get back together with Patrick. He probably would have told me that, but I had run off before he got the chance to get the words out. "Well, you should probably chew him out. Let him know you're really done with him," I suggested. "I already did," Cedric grumbled. "If he hasn't gotten the idea by now, he's purposely playing dumb. Or just being creepy." "Oh, speaking of Patrick," he sat upright, raising a brow at me. "Why did you want to know who he was the other day?" Crap. I glanced away, suddenly remembering why I had been avoiding him all this time. "That? I was just curious," I lied. "Oh," Cedric said. He didn't sound convinced. "Really? It had almost seemed like you were upset." He'd seen right through me. The tone of his voice said it all. I turned back to face him, and he was just watching me. A knowing, slightly curious look in his eyes. "Why would that upset me?" I asked with a laugh. "I don't know," he shifted closer pointedly. "You tell me." He had seen through me, but he wanted me to say it myself. My instincts told me to run away, but I remembered how angry I had been seeing him with another guy that day. That anger had surpassed any fear I felt of him being disgusted by me or any fear of what might happen if my parents found out. At least, that's how I felt at the moment. He was watching me expectantly. I had a choice. I did the boldest thing I had ever made in my entire life. I leaned in awkwardly and slotted my lips against his. This was, of course, my first ever kiss. I was sure Cedric could feel that way. My lips quivered. My face was warm, and I felt it grow even warmer when I felt him smile against my lips. He pulled away just enough to mumble, "You are too cute, you know that?" "Please don't tease me," I responded quietly. It came out more like a whine. Cedric laughed and leaned in again, effectively taking the reins from me. And it was a good thing he did too, as inexperienced as I was. As he kissed me, I forgot everything I had ever been worried about up to that point. He thought I was cute. He wasn't disgusted by me. He didn't want to get back together with his ex. I didn't know what this meant for our relationship, but at that moment, I did not care. The kiss remained chaste, and he pulled back to stare at me, gauging my reaction. Then he smiled, and I knew I probably had the dopiest look on my face. Perhaps he would have gone for another kiss if I hadn't gotten that phone call. I blinked as it started to vibrate in my pocket, and when I pulled it out and read the contact name on the screen, my heart did a flip in my chest. Mom. I got up suddenly, much to Cedric's confusion. "Excuse me while I take this," I said before ducking out of the room and into the hallway, answering the call with a breathless, "Hello?" The conversation that proceeded sapped all the happiness right out of me. An hour later, When the call was over, I went back into Cedric's room to explain the situation to him. "Your mother wants to come over?" he repeated after I had explained everything to him. "Yes," I breathed out. "She has someone she wants to visit here in the city over the weekend. She knows we have an extra room, so—" "Oh," Cedric smiled. "Hey, that's not a problem. I'd love to meet your mom." I shook my head frantically. "No, it is a problem. My mom is really homophobic. She'd freak out if she found out about your job or—" I trailed off. I was referring to what just happened between us, of course. We hadn't even gotten the chance to figure out what to make of it before this came up. Now my mom was coming over in a few days, and Cedric and I would have to pretend like there was nothing going on between us, which went about as well as one would expect. 3 days later, she arrived on Friday afternoon. I took time off from work just so I could welcome her. "Eli, sweetheart, it's been ages. You barely call home," she gushed as soon as she stepped into the room, pulling me into a tight hug. I laughed awkwardly, hugging her back. As soon as she let me go, Cedric approached with a friendly smile. "Nice to meet you, ma'am. My name is Cedric." My mom focused on him, her brows raising in surprise. "It's nice to meet you too, dear. Call me Lauren." She smiled, seemingly completely charmed by him already. "You're Eli's roommate? What a handsome young man you are." As she bustled her way into the living room with her luggage, Cedric and I exchanged a glance. My mom was particularly curious about Cedric, much to our dismay. He left that evening for work as usual, and she was asleep by the time he got back. We were relieved, assuming that saved him from her questioning, but she was asking him for his profession the very next morning. "I work as a waiter, ma'am," Cedric lied smoothly. "A waiter? Where? I'd love to stop by for something to eat," she said with a smile. "It's pretty far away," he responded. "You'd be better off eating somewhere here in the city." "Well, all right," she responded, seemingly placid. I breathed out a silent sigh of relief, but really, I should have known better. My mom is many things, and nosy is one of them. I made dinner that night. As I did, I noticed my mother on her phone acting strangely. When we sat for dinner, she seemed cold, and then she spoke. "You know, you haven't been posting a lot on social media, Eli," she said. She was staring at the both of us with very hard eyes, not acknowledging the food in front of her. It made me nervous. "I don't post a lot on social media," I responded. She suddenly turned to Cedric. "But you do, don't you, Cedric?" My heart sank. Cedric remained calm outwardly. "I guess so. But how would you know that, ma'am?" he asked. My mother scoffed, pushing her chair back and standing up. "Elijah follows you on Instagram. Finding you wasn't hard. When you said you were a waiter, I never would have guessed it was at a gay establishment." She turned her head to me. "Did you know about this?" Wait, of course you did, and you stayed here?" she hissed, her brows furrowed. "Elijah, you do know these kind of things can influence you, right? You might think they won't, but you never know what people like him could do to you." I flinched at the venom in her voice. She had spoken to me like that in the past, and I usually just stayed quiet and took it. But hearing her speak about Cedric that way made me angry. Before Cedric himself had the chance to respond, I pushed my chair back and stood up as well. "Don't talk about him like that," I spat. She jumped in surprise, likely not expecting me to raise my voice like that. "Are you defending this kind of lifestyle now?" she asked, shocked. "You've only been here a few months, and you're speaking to me like this? I am your mother." "And Cedric is my friend and roommate," I retorted. "If you can't support his lifestyle, then you can leave. I'm not going to sit around and let you insult him like this." My mom just looked even more shocked at that, and then red from embarrassment and anger. She stormed into the guest room, packed up her things, and left. It was only after she was gone that I realized the magnitude of what I'd just done. I slumped down on the couch in disbelief at my own actions, cradling my head in my hands. I am so screwed, I groaned. If my dad hears about this, I am so done for. Cedric came and sat beside me, wrapping his arm around my shoulders. Hey, he said in his low voice. Relax, they can't do anything to you. You're an adult, aren't you? Yes, I responded, my voice muffled. And you live on your own, he continued. Independent, right? Completely, I said, raising my head to look up at him. There you go, he smiled at me. Things might get pretty bad, but at the end of the day, you're all the way over here now. You're free to live your life however you want, you know? I sighed. He was right, but that didn't stop the nerves from eating away at me from the inside. Oh, and thanks, he added, for standing up for me like that. And he leaned in and kissed me again. I was still terrified of what was to come, but I felt that if I was with Cedric, things might not be so bad. Of course, my actions caused a huge scandal within the family, and when Cedric and I officially got together and came out to them, I went from being a failure to being the black sheep, the name no one in my extended family dared to call, the gay one. And it sucked, but Cedric being there to support me made it all easier. Weeks later. The weeks passed. I, of course, had a long phone with my parents where they let me know plainly that they didn't support the life I was living and that I was disowned. I'd like to say that I took this news in stride, but I was heartbroken for a while. Our rocky relationship aside, they were my parents, and it hurt knowing being gay was enough for them to forego all the years they had raised me. I was down for several days, but Cedric was there to cheer me up as much as he could. We started going on dates, then I was nervous at first. I'd never actually been on a date before, but to my delight, it wasn't much different from just spending time with him, going to different places, having fun. Living with him as a lover instead of just a roommate wasn't much different, with a few differences. Cedric was an affectionate kind of guy. I had to get used to him coming up behind me and hugging me, kissing my cheek. Not that I minded it, it was just new. Everything with him felt new and amazing. For the first time in forever, I felt loved. I didn't have to hide or contort myself to be something I wasn't, and I wasn't going to give that up for the world. Eventually, Cedric finished his degree and got a better paying job. With both our incomes, we were able to afford a better place, and before I knew it, we started the rest of our lives together. The end. Do you think one should always defend their loved ones from homophobic comments, no matter the situation? Thanks for watching. Consider subscribing to become part of our Rainbow Force, and stay wholesome.